This is a literal manifestation of bloodthirsty damnation. Painted in 1819, it represents William Blake's vision of a flea. Blake claimed he was painting a spiritual entity that appeared to him during a séance. 200 years before Blake's vision, the poet John Donne observed the same insect through the lens of 17th-century microscopy. Donne treated the flea as a metaphysical conceit, an intellectual tool used to bridge the gap between biological blood and the human spirit. On the surface, his poem The Flea functions as a piece of erotic manipulation. A man attempts to convince a woman to sleep with him because a single flea has bitten them both. While the premise appears trivial, the poem is built as a theological proof. It relies on the sacramentality of sex, the idea that physical intimacy is a prerequisite for spiritual understanding. Donne uses the poem's structure to encode the Holy Trinity and map the act of intercourse onto the Catholic Eucharist. He argues that physical, earthly acts provide the architecture necessary to perceive God. Structural reading reveals how 17th-century poets embedded specific meaning into meter and form. The layout of the flea is divided into 3 distinct stanzas. This reflects Donne's focus on the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Each individual stanza contains 9 lines, exactly 3 squared. This creates a mathematical framework of 27 lines, 3 cubed. The auditory structure enforces this geometry through the rhyme scheme. The pattern follows AA, BB, CC, DDD. Every stanza is anchored by a concluding triplet of 3 rhyming lines. This mathematical rigidity stands in direct contrast to the lustful narrative of the characters. Precision is the method Donne uses to build a sacred container for his argument. He establishes divine authority over a profane subject. The form of the poem demonstrates its thesis. The Trinity is present even within the life of an insect. Scholar Kyle Fuller uses the term interanimation to describe how the spiritual soul requires flesh to be realized. This view challenges the Platonic trope of the body as a prison for the soul. For Donne, the physical body is the vehicle and the book through which the soul communicates. In the first 2 stanzas, the narrator explains how the biological reality of the flea biting both lovers physically mingles their blood. He elevates this biological event into a sacred space, calling the insect a marriage temple. This concept of mingled blood is linked to the liturgical act of the Eucharist. Here, physical matter, the wine, is required to access spiritual grace. Donne maps this mechanism back to his erotic argument. Just as a communicant requires the physical wine, humans require physical union to experience divine love. Sexual intercourse is presented as the physical sacrament required to access the divine. In the 3rd stanza, the woman crushes the flea. The poem describes this as purpling her nail in blood of innocence. Scholar Teresa Di Pasquale notes that this phrasing maps the insect's death to the crucifixion of Christ. The woman believes that by killing the flea, she has destroyed the narrator's logic and won the debate. Donne responds with a theological distinction between the physical sign and the spiritual sacrament. Destroying the physical symbol, the flea, does not destroy the underlying truth of the love it represented. Applied to the woman, her physical virginity is merely a tangible sign of her honor. Yielding her virginity destroys the sign, but leaves her spiritual virtue intact. This argument relies on separating the state of the body from the purity of the soul. Sacrificing the physical symbol is presented as a sinless communion and a spiritually mature act of grace. The poem functions as a multi-layered philosophical model. The flea holds the sacred and the secular in simultaneous tension. Donne concludes that true virginity consists in true maturity. For Donne, experiencing the spiritual requires engaging the physical. The body is not an obstacle to God, but the instrument designed to perceive him. Recall William Blake's perspective from the beginning of the video. Blake saw only a literal monster of damnation. Donne observed the same insect and saw the structural architecture of God. He saw the flea as the mechanism of the Eucharist playing out in miniature. Through the microscopic lens of a parasite, Donne presents human physical connection as the sacrament required for divine understanding.